like a good week. It's beautiful outside. The Golden State Valkyries keep on winning. Taylor Swift is engaged. Like, what else could you ask for? I mean, what an incredible week for all of us. But anyways, I'm really glad you're here. And I'm really glad that you're a part of this series, Becoming Us, because I'm really, really passionate about what we've been talking about here at Canvas. And that is how we can be more intentional about building meaningful community in our lives. Because we likely don't agree on everything, and that's okay. But I bet we agree on one thing, and that is that like we're not meant to do life alone. Right? Deep within our bones, we understand this, and we believe this. We're not meant to do this life alone, that a life alone is not much of a life at all. And yet we also probably agree on the fact that building community is easier said than done. It takes a lot of work. Community will be the source of your greatest joy, and community will also be the source of your greatest heartache as well. Finding and rather building community is a messy but worth it process. And so this series, Becoming Us, is all about a series of conversations that we want to have about how can we become more intentional and strategic to form the kind of community that we're created for. And last week I said this, and I'll probably say it again each and every week because it's sort of the big idea of this teaching series, and that is that the community that you long for is not something you're going to just find. Right? You're not going to accidentally stumble upon meaningful community, but meaningful community is not something you find, it's something you form. It requires intentionality, one day, one person, one moment at a time. And last week I talked about two ingredients that if you want to build meaningful community, these are two ingredients that you have to have, not one or the other, but both, and that is devotion and sacrificial love. You got to be willing to continue to show up. If you want meaningful community, it doesn't happen quickly. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time. And you have to continue to show up again and again and again and again. It takes devotion because time is the capital of community. And if you don't invest time, you will never build community. But when you invest time, you will eventually build the community that you're looking for and longing for. But then the second thing is sacrificial love. Right? It's so important that when we show up into spaces of community that we're not just asking ourselves, what am I going to get? But instead we say, what am I going to give? That we move out of what, honestly, we see a lot in culture, and that is a transactional approach to community, and instead approach community with the posture of sacrificial love. And I believe that if you show up again and again with devotion, and you show up looking to be a friend, that you're going to find a friend in the process. That you're going to build the community and form the community that your heart is longing for. It won't be easy, but it is possible. And this series is all about how can we together take those steps towards forming the community that we're longing for. And I think this conversation is so important, talking about community, because community is like the incubator of your formation. I've heard it said that community is the incubator of spiritual formation. I would argue it's the incubator of all formation. Like you are who you are as a result of those that you've shared life with. That none of you became who you are in isolation. That if I asked you, why do you think the way you think? Or why do you have the skills that you have? Why are you passionate about certain things? Chances are you wouldn't point me to a program or a place, but you would tell me stories about people. People that formed you. People that shaped you. People that challenged you. People that affected you in both maybe good or bad ways. Like you are who you are as a result of the people that you do life with, because community is the incubator of formation. And so if that is true, and if you want to become the right person, which I know that you want, that means you have to do life with the right people. And if you're going to do life with the right people, that means you cannot do life equally with all people. It means you're going to have different kinds of relationships with different people. And today is about giving you permission to say that is okay. Like there are some people you're just naturally going to be closer to and you need to. And then there's going to be some people that perhaps you're friendly, but it's not a very formative relationship. And then maybe there are also those people that you love at a distance. And that is okay as well. Today I want to talk about relational boundaries. Because I think if you're going to experience meaningful community, you actually have to have some boundaries. And I wonder if I were to ask you, what are your relational boundaries, if you would have a clear and concise answer to that question. And I don't ask that to shame anybody, but I think probably The truth of the matter is that most of us don't have language for our boundaries relationally. It's like you're either our friend or you're not. But I think there's more nuance to boundaries that we need to talk about. And today I want to talk about how can we begin to create some relational boundaries that will lead to the community that you're longing for with others. So let's talk about that today. To start the teaching today, I want you to imagine something. Let's imagine that it's a Friday night. It's been a long week, and you're tired. You're not going to cook your meal for you, and so you're going to order on DoorDash. Anybody just love DoorDash? Come on, somebody. And so you're going to order your favorite meal on DoorDash. My favorite place to order on DoorDash is taco. Anybody like taco in the marina? So good. Okay, you should go there. And let's just say you order a burrito from Taco, and the DoorDasher arrives, knocks on your door, and opens up the door and says, "Here's your burrito." And you take the burrito, and just before you shut the door on the DoorDasher puts his hand on the door and keeps you from shutting it. And he says, "Hey, before I go and before you enjoy your burrito, would it be cool if I took a quick look at your bedroom?" What would you do? You pepper spray that fool, right? You would slam the door shut, you would call the police, and you'd probably leave them a 1-star review, right? See, we would do that because instinctively we understand something about boundaries. And that is that there are some spaces in your life that are simply not open to everyone. And yet, here's the irony of it. While we're likely good at protecting our physical spaces, many of us struggle to protect our relational ones. While many of us have immense clarity as to what boundaries should exist in our physical world, for many of us, we struggle to know what are the boundaries that we should have in place for our relational world. And so we let people, maybe it's unhealthy coworkers or toxic exes or old friends or relationships you have outgrown or even unhealthy family members, roam freely through the inner rooms of your emotional and spiritual life. And then we wonder, why do I feel so overwhelmed? Why do I feel so bitter? Why do I feel so jaded towards people? Why do I feel so misunderstood? And why do I feel so drained when I'm around this group of people? And today, what I want to explore and what I want to invite you to see yourself as is the relational architect of your life. That you are the relational architect of your life, and it is your responsibility to design a community that makes sense for who you are and, most importantly, who you want to become. And so today I want to ask you, what if the architecture of your relationships is what's actually keeping you from the depth that you actually crave? Maybe it's not that you need to pray more. Maybe it's not that you need to go to another Bible study. Or maybe you just need to be more consistent on Sundays. All of those things are great. Do them. I love it. But for some of us, the reason that we're frustrated, we're jaded, and we're burnt out, for some of us, it's because our relational house, is out of order. And today is all about asking the question, what would it look like to be the architect of my relational home, and how do I design it in such a way that I can experience the meaningful community that I know I was created to have? So let's talk about it. Let's talk about boundaries. The first thing is this. If you're taking notes today, this is so important if you're going to create relational boundaries, and it's understanding that you cannot build meaningful connections if everyone has equal access in your life. Have you ever met the person who's like, "I just give my 100% to everything"? Like, you literally can't do that for more than one thing. It's mathematically impossible. When you say yes to something, there is less of you to give. I've heard one person say, just make sure the yes is always worth the less. Because when you say yes, there's less of you. You cannot give 100% of yourself to everything. And you cannot build meaningful connection if everyone has 100% equal access to your life. See, when you give the same access to everyone, typically what happens is one of the following. You lose the depth of real connection. So you have a bunch of shallow relationships, but you have no one that actually goes beneath the surface and ever asks you the hard questions. Or you feel guilty that you cannot possibly show up for everyone as much as you would hope you could. Or you end up resentful, emotionally fried, spiritually depleted, or just inauthentic. You smile while you're with everybody, but you don't really want to be there. Why? Because access without boundaries will always lead to burnout. Relational access with no clear boundaries will lead to burnout. In fact, a study came out of UC Berkeley, that found that the lack of clear boundaries in relationships is one of the top causes of burnout in the lives of people, especially among empathetic, high capacity, or service oriented people. One of the top reasons leading to burnout is a lack of relational boundaries. See, some of us are exhausted, and it's not because of what we're doing, but it's because of who we're doing life with. That we've allowed ourselves to have, or other people to have, unfiltered access to our lives. And some of us as followers of Jesus are like, but isn't that what we're supposed to do? Aren't we supposed to be there for everyone and serve everyone and be available to everyone whenever there's a need? Shouldn't I be the first there to show up and help? And while I believe that desire is noble, I just want you to know not even Jesus did that. In fact, when we look at the life of Jesus, one thing you see with great clarity is that Jesus was clear about his boundaries. And if Jesus is the picture not only of God with skin on, but really of what it looks like to be fully human and fully alive, then when we look at the life of Jesus, we're being invited into that life as well. And when we look at the life of Jesus, we see that he lived a life that included boundaries. In Mark chapter 1, verse 35, it says this: before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. And later, Simon and the others, these are Jesus' disciples, they went out and found Jesus. And when they found him, they said, "Everyone is looking for you." But Jesus replied, we must go on to other towns as well, and I'll preach to them too. That is why I came. I think it's interesting his disciples show up and they're clearly exaggerating. Everyone is looking for you, right? And that's sort of what we do when we feel forced into saying yes to something we might need to actually say no to, is we convince ourselves that like everyone is depending on us. But Jesus had the clarity of vision, which led to a clarity in his boundaries, to say that while I am here for those people, I'm also here for everybody else. I'm here to serve this other town, and I must preach to them too. So Jesus establishes this boundary. They say, you need to go to these people, and Jesus says, not today. And then in Luke chapter 5, verse 15, it says, but despite Jesus' instructions, the report of his power spread even faster, and vast crowds came to hear him preach and to be healed of their diseases. But Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. And every introvert said, amen, right? Like his fame is growing. The news about who this Jesus is and what he can do is growing. And there's people who need Jesus. They're showing up to be healed by Jesus, to hear Jesus. I mean, does Jesus just not like care about these people and that's why he withdrew himself? No, he just had boundaries. In fact, scripture tells us that Jesus picked 12 disciples. He didn't pick everyone to be his part of his disciples. And within that 12, scripture tells us he had 3 of the 12 that he was particularly close to. He would take these 3 to the Mount of Transfiguration, and they would witness something with Jesus that the other 9 would not. And within these 3 disciples that Jesus had, there was one, John, the disciple whom Jesus loved, that we're told Jesus was closest to most of all. Even within Jesus' relational network, he had boundaries. He had different experiences with different people. And the question is, if even Jesus didn't live without relational boundaries, then why would we try? Like if even Jesus, the Son of God, had relational boundaries, then why do so many of us live like we don't need them for us? So you can't build meaningful connections if everyone has equal access. But if we're going to practice boundaries, we need to embrace, I think, some hard truths about boundaries. Like if we're actually going to do this, underneath the desire to create boundaries, there's some truths that we have to embrace for our lives. And the first is this, and that is that your heart is your responsibility. If you're going to create boundaries, then you have to understand that your heart is not your neighbor's responsibility. It's not your roommate's responsibility. It's not your pastor's responsibility. It's not your partner's responsibility. Your heart, it's your responsibility. No one can show up and do the work for your heart but you. And I learned this when I was in this group therapy session. And this person in this group was sharing about all the people that were taking her time and taking her energy and taking her focus. Everyone was just taking from her, supposedly. And finally, the therapist in the room says, when did you stop taking ownership of your life? When did you stop living like a manager of your life and now you're living like a renter? She said, your heart is your responsibility. No one takes your time unless you give it to them. And I sat there, I was like, oh, snap. But I sat there, I was like, yeah, my heart's my responsibility. I have to own the health of my heart. And by the way, this is what Scripture talks about in Proverbs chapter 4. Proverbs 4:23 echoes what actually said first, but my therapist would say later. They say, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. You need to understand, to the Hebrew mindset, the heart was not just the center of your emotions, which we tend to make it today, right? Like we make it the center of our feelings, but to the Hebrew, the heart was the center of everything. It was the center of your life. As your heart goes, your life follows. Where your heart sets, your life starts. So if you want to have a healthy life, you have to have a healthy heart. This is why again and again and again in the scriptures, God says, I'm not worried about the outside. I'm worried about the inside. I'm worried about what's really going on in your heart, because the health of your heart determines the course and health of your life. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Why? Because your heart, it's your responsibility. And I don't think that the author here in Proverbs 4 is telling us that you need to live your life guarded. That's not the takeaway. Build walls around your heart. That's a miserable life. But I think what the author is telling us is you need to be careful. Be careful with how you steward your heart, because your heart ultimately is your responsibility. Dr. Henry Cloud, who wrote a really great book on boundaries, he said, you get to take responsibility for your emotional life. Nobody can or should do that for you. The first hard truth, if you're going to create boundaries, is you got to go, hey, my heart is my responsibility. It's not anybody else's. The second thing is this, that enablement with good intentions is still enablement. Enablement with good intentions is still enablement. I've actually never met someone who's an enabler who doesn't have good intentions. They're usually trying to do what they think is good for the other person, but really at the end of the day, enablement with good intentions is still enablement. And it will not only short-circuit their development, it will also short-circuit your freedom and your formation as well. In Galatians chapter 6, the author Paul, he's teaching to these new followers of Jesus in a city called Galatia, and he's teaching them how to live into this new way and to become a new, not only a new person, but a new people together. And in Galatians chapter 6, Paul, he says this, he says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they're something when they're not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves. They can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. And then verse 5, he says, for each one should carry their own load. Now, if you were paying attention, you were probably confused like I was confused, right? Because it sounds like Paul is contradicting himself. In verse 2, Paul says, carry each other's burdens. And then he ends it in verse 5 saying, each one should carry their own load. So what is it, Paul? Should I carry each other's burdens, or am I just responsible to carry my own load? And I think Paul would say, yes, both. In fact, when you look at the language of Paul here, he's talking about two different things in verse 2 and in verse 5. When you look at the Greek language, which is what Paul wrote in here, in Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, he says burdens, and that Greek word is the word baros. Everyone say baros. You're learning some Greek today. It refers to a crushing weight. Baros is this crushing weight. It's something someone cannot carry alone. It's the terminal diagnosis. It's the financial crisis. It's the deep grief because of the loss of a loved one. It's those moments where you're going, what I'm experiencing is too much for any person to be able to do or handle or carry on their own. That's baros. But then when Paul says in verse 5, load, the Greek word is not baros, it's the Greek word portion, which is how we get the English word portion. It refers to daily objectives, your normal responsibilities, emotions, and your daily decisions. It's the stuff that you are responsible to carry just by being a functioning human being. So you have burden, baros, the things that are too much for one person to carry, and then you have load, portion, which is our daily objectives. Think about it this way. If someone breaks their leg, you're not going to stand next to them with a broken leg and be like, figure it out, right? You're going to be like, come on, let's walk it off. No, you're going to get down on the ground. You're going to help them up, and you're going to walk with them. I witnessed this actually yesterday. I was going through a run in the Presidio, and I was near the top of the hill. I talked about a couple weeks ago. It's the hill tourists think they can conquer until they actually tried to do it. And this tourist was riding on a bike and got up to the top of the hill and was about, I don't know, maybe 20 feet in front of me. And her legs just decided, we're done now. And all of a sudden, she just tilted over on her bike and just went plop on the ground. And the person, some of you are laughing, and you're like, is it mean that I'm laughing? It's okay. But there was a person on a bike with a helmet standing right, I kid you not, standing right next to this person who just fell on the ground. It was an electric bike too. So it was like a heavy bike on this person's leg. And the person on the bike in the helmet just stood there like this. So I ran over there and like picked up the bike and helped her up because this lady was not going to get this 50-pound electric bike off of her. That's Barros. It's not waiting for them to pick themselves up because it's too much for them. You lift it up for them and carry it with them. But loads, those are the long-term responsibilities that require personal maturity. Like if someone breaks their leg, of course you help them. But if you're walking down Chestnut Street trying to decide what's for lunch and, I don't know, your friend just decides to be like, I'm too tired, and they just sit on the ground, and they're like, just carry me wherever we go. You're gonna be like, no, like you have two legs, let's walk, right? Because you can do that. It's the difference between burdens and loads. And we're told to carry one another's burdens, those things that are too heavy to do on your own, but there is a load that all of us are responsible to carry on our own. And see, when we treat someone's load like it's our burden, we short circuit their growth and drain ourselves in the process. Enablement with good intentions is still enablement. And if you're going to create boundaries in your life, you're going to have to know the difference between helping someone with their burden and enabling someone with their load. Does that make sense? Third is this: saying no doesn't make you unloving. And all my people-pleasing people, hear me on this one, right? Saying no doesn't make you unloving. And if you're a follower of Jesus, saying no doesn't make you unchristian. Remember in Mark 1, all Jesus' disciples like, everyone's looking for you. And Jesus is like, yeah, that's nice, but I got other things I need to do, and I'm focused on that. You see, saying yes to everything will lead to you being faithful to nothing. I think there's an intimate connection between having a clear vision and clear boundaries. That when you have a clear vision for your life, your boundaries become clear. In fact, I've never met a person who has clear vision that does not also have clear boundaries. Because when you have clear vision, you lock your sight on where it is you're going, and you remove anything that keeps you from getting there. See, Jesus wasn't afraid to disappoint people or to be misunderstood. And sometimes in the name of creating healthy boundaries, you will disappoint people. You will be misunderstood. It doesn't mean you're unloving. It just means you're focused on what God has called you to do. And I call this a holy no. And all of us need to have a holy no every once in a while. And it's not the rejection of people, but it's the reflection of your priorities. A holy no says, I know I could do this. And you know that the hard things is not good versus bad. It's good versus great. That's the tension. And for a lot of us, we sacrifice great on the altar of good. And we lose focus. And we lose focus because we lost boundaries. So if you're going to create relational boundaries, you got to remember your heart is your responsibility. Enablement with good intentions is still enablement. And saying no doesn't make you unloving. So what does this actually look like in real life? And by the way, I'm not standing up here as someone who's mastered this. As a pastor, I'll be honest, if I can, I've really struggled with, I'm a pastor. I need to say yes whenever anyone calls. I have to answer. Whenever anyone needs something, I need to respond to it as much. But I found out, because I burnt out, that I can't do everything. And so I get this. If this is hard for you, if there's resistance happening in your heart when we talk about boundaries. But I've learned something that has helped me. It doesn't make it easy necessarily, but it has helped me create relational boundaries, and I hope it helps you as well. I want to give you a visual. I'm a visual learner here. So let's just imagine this house here is sort of your relational house. And this is you. It's pretty good, right? I worked really hard on this, guys. I mean, give me something, all right? Now I get it, by the way, that talking about boundaries, especially in the church space, some of the times we're like, it just feels like, is that like Jesus? You know, I I need to be accessible to everyone. Let me remind you, Jesus in Matthew chapter 7, the verse won't be on the screen, but in Matthew chapter 7, Jesus actually says, do not throw your pearls before swine. He says, don't give your pearls to pigs because the pigs will destroy the pearls and then attack you. He's not really talking about throwing pearls to pigs, by the way. He's saying, look, there's some relationships that cannot hold the value of your time and energy or dignity. And so there's got to be some boundaries. Otherwise, not only will you lose what was valuable, but you'll also get attacked in the process. So I want to show you what that kind of looks like with this visual here. This is you. This is your relational house. And good news is you are the owner, not the renter. You may never be able to own in San Francisco, but you own this house, all right? And you are the architect, and it is your responsibility to design the relational home that you need in your life. Now, there's a few different elements to your relational home and 4 different places that people will find themselves. The first is what I would call the porch people, right? Porch people are those that they're cordial, but it's distant, right? You maybe know them by name. You see them every now and again. If you work in a large company, maybe you see them in the lunchroom, or I don't know. It's very casual but very distant. Maybe even people here at Canvas would fall into this category for some of you. You probably don't know everyone intimately here at Canvas. There's a lot of porch people here, right? People that it's cordial but it's distant. They're not really in the house, and that's okay. We all have porch people. But then you have the second space in the interior of your house, and this is when you start letting people in, and that is the living room. And the living room is that space, or rather that group of people, that they are friendly, but not formative. It's friendly, but not formative. These are friends you enjoy being with, but they don't necessarily speak into your spiritual, emotional, mental growth, right? They know you socially, but they probably don't form you deeply spiritually. These are people you do game nights with, or people you go grab lunch with, or neighbors that you chat with during your kids' soccer game. You share laughs with, updates with, you maybe even share light frustrations with, but you're not really going deep into who you are, like the fears and the dreams or the deepest struggles that you have. These relationships, they're fun, they're easy. You probably hang out with these people maybe once a week or every other week, but you have like this growing relationship, but it's still not deeply formative. And again, that's okay. The third space is the kitchen. And the kitchen is where family begins to form, right? At the kitchen table, you're not just sharing a meal, you're beginning to share life. I think there's a reason Jesus often built community around a table, right? Because there's something sacred about the table, something sacred about that space where you begin to share the deeper aspects of your life, your fears, your dreams, your passions, your worries, your insecurities. You begin to share maybe even past wounds that you have experienced in your life. And these people are people that you trust with that information. Do you know what refrigerator rights are? It's okay. So if I came to your house today and I just walked in, opened the fridge and grabbed a drink without asking you if I could, that would be weird, right? People with refrigerator rights are the people that can walk in your house, open the fridge, grab a drink, and you're like, whatever, it's not a big deal. These people in the kitchen are people that have like refrigerator rights, but like to your heart, that they can actually begin to open you up a little bit. They can begin to ask you those questions that are a little bit uncomfortable, challenge you, encourage you, and begin to walk with you. As Proverbs 27, verse 17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. The sharpening of community begins to really happen here at the kitchen table. But then you have, and go with me, this might sound weird, but go with me with the metaphor. You have the third space, which is the master bedroom. And in this space, it is the most intimate, sacred space of your relationship. It's like, master bedroom. Okay, we're not in junior high. So master bedroom is that space of sacred, or what the scriptures would even call covenant community. And yes, that if you're married belongs to your partner, but it also might belong to a spiritual director. It belongs to that person or a small group of people. This is the smallest room of all the rooms. That small group of people that they have proven, there is evidence that they can see the worst in you and they don't walk away. That they can say the hard things to you, even if in the moment it makes you so mad, but they're right. But they're willing to do it. They're the people that encourage you. They sit in the mud with you. They really, really know you, and you are unfiltered with them. That is this space And that is a space of sacred trust. And as I said, this should be the smallest space of all, where we don't allow everybody and anybody to enter. In Psalms chapter 101, verse 6 through 7, David, he writes, he says, I will search for faithful people to be my companions. I think that's really interesting. He doesn't say, I'm going to wait for people to be my faithful companions. I really hope they show up soon. Someone will walk into my life and they'll be 100% the friend that I need. No, he says, I'm going to search for faithful people to be my companions. Only those who are above reproach will be allowed to serve me. The subtext there, not everyone's going to be allowed to serve me. Not everyone's going to be allowed in the innermost rooms of my relational house. I'm not just going to let anybody and everybody into that. I will not allow deceivers to serve in my house, he says, and liars will not stay in my presence. What's David saying? He's saying, unapologetically, I will not give equal access to everybody. I'm going to pursue those who are faithful. I'm going to pursue those who are above reproach, meaning this, I am not going to open my heart to someone who talks about everybody else, a gossiper. They just love talking about everybody else's business. I'm never going to let that person in that space, because if they're talking about everybody else, guess who else they'll talk about? You. And they'll do it to everybody else. You see, this space belongs, like David says, to those who have proven they are above reproach. I will not allow deceivers, duplicitous, two-faced people to serve in my house. I think what I'm hitting this point so hard is because this is the space, especially the kitchen and the master bedroom. These are the spaces that form you the most. So as you move people into these spaces, the bar should not be the same as these two. The bar should be raised. The expectations should be increased. And can I do a little side note on family? Being family, parents in the room hear this. And if you come from a family with like overprotective parents, hear this. Being family does not entitle you to unlimited access. Just because you're my mom and dad does not mean you get unlimited access to roam the house however you see fit. Some family, they belong in these spaces, the bedroom or the kitchen. Some family, they belong in the living room. Some family belongs on the porch. And y'all know, some family, they don't even need to know where you live, right? They need to be like in another city, as far away as possible. But just because your family does not entitle you to those rooms. And I think especially those who are, I don't know, I found in our 20s, especially in early 30s, that's such an important conversation to have. Especially if you're like me and come from a pretty toxic family and broken family. One of the hardest things I've had to do was draw lines on family members because it was for my own health, sanity, and healing. And for some of you, and I don't know, I'm hanging on this longer than last service because maybe there's somebody here in this room that you're here today because God is telling you it's time to create some boundaries, even with your family. Yeah, see, boundaries, they're not about loving less. They're about loving wisely. I'm not asking you to love people less. I actually think we can love everyone, but I'm going to relate to everyone differently. I'm going to love wisely. Do you remember on Facebook when going Facebook official was a thing? You guys remember that? Only millennials are laughing. So it was like this thing, for those that don't know, once upon a time, your relationship wasn't real until it became Facebook official. And I remember like that moment, it was so huge. You click the button and we're like, in a relationship. And it was like, whoa, like this. And then if it got messy, it was like, it's complicated. Remember that? And it was a big deal because I think we understood that as soon as we like click that button and we define this a little bit, that there were now new implications and expectations attached to that. And I think that's actually not a bad thing. And if you're going to create boundaries, relational boundaries, and have a house that is in order and not allow anyone and everyone just to roam in and through the house of your life, then you're going to have clarity on what each of these spaces require. What do you need to be a friend in the living room? What is required of you to be a friend in the kitchen? And then what are the many requirements that's required of you to that place of sacred and deep commitment with one another? It's not about rejection, but it is about wisdom. When you don't have boundaries, especially relational ones, you don't just get overwhelmed, you get stuck. Like you never really experience the kind of community you're looking for. I mean, we see this play out in the life of Moses. If the band wants to come up. In the life of Moses, in Exodus chapter 18, Moses is trying to do everything for everyone. It's this really ancient story, but it feels very relevant. He's trying to meet every need. He's going to every meeting. He's responding to every request. And he's getting burnt out because he has no boundaries. And eventually, Moses' father-in-law, his name is Jethro, he shows up to Moses. He sees what's going on in Moses' life and his lack of boundaries. And Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, gave this super profound passage of scripture in Exodus chapter 18, verse 17. Here's what he says. This is not good. This is not good. It wasn't good for Moses. It wasn't good for the people that he was trying to serve. Because without boundaries, Moses was becoming not only less effective, he was actually becoming less healthy, less human. Because you can't love well when you're chronically overextended. You cannot love well when you've got nothing left. And you can't ever build healthy community if your house is out of order. So if your community and friendships, like it just feels like a hot mess. Like I know how hard that is. But I have really good news for you. You're the architect. You have the ability to design the relational house that you need. You have the ability to determine who is on the porch, who's in the living room, who's in the kitchen, who's in the master bedroom, and what layers and levels of relationship you have with them. It is entirely up to you. And so what I'm inviting you into today is to take ownership of that. Take ownership of that. And what that means is getting clarity on what the implications and expectations of each level of relationship are. What are they? But then also taking a step back, looking at your house and asking who's in the wrong room. Or, who needs to be moved into a deeper room. For some of us, we have people in the kitchen. They need to be in the living room. Like they're not adding value. It's not a transformational relationship. It's just kind of more transactional. It's time to shift that relationship. And that's okay. By the way, can we just say, this could be hard. My wife rejects this, but I'm going to say it anyways. Like, it's very rare that one friendship will be the same forever. Right? I mean, that's just like the sucky thing about growing up sometimes. Is you're just like, we were such good friends in this season, but now in this season, like, it's different. It doesn't mean you have to cut them out. Doesn't mean you have to ghost them. Doesn't mean they're a terrible person. It just means it might be time to change the room they're in. And that's okay. But it also might mean this, that if you were to look at those who are in your kitchen, like a master bedroom of your relational life, I guess I would want to ask you, would you be excited, like if those friends were the predictor of your future? Like if you could look at those friends and say, my life will become like the culmination of them, would you be excited about your life? Remember when you were in junior high and your parents were like, be careful who you hang out with. And as a junior higher, you're like, I'm my own person, Mom. But we grow up then, don't we? And we realize, sure, there's unique things about you, but we are the culmination of those we shared life with the most. Your people in a lot of ways are like your prophecy. People predict the future of your life. So if you look at your circle of friends and say, I wouldn't want my life to look like that, it's time to change your circle of friends. But if you look at your circle of friends in the kitchen or the master bedroom, you're like, man, yeah, if I could be generous like them and passionate like them and love Jesus like them and courageous like them, yeah, that would be a great life. Then congrats, you have a great community. Hold them dearly. Do life with them. You're the architect, the owner, the designer. So this morning, I want to invite you to ask, how is your house doing? Is it in order? Or is it time for you to zoom in and be more intentional in your community, in your boundaries? Can we pray? God, we love you so much.